Hello everyone, my name is Aja Atwood. I'm the CEO of Trail Technologies, and we've designed a system that will automatically train the tall plant to grow in a short, small space. So what it does is it trains the plant automatically to grow sideways using what's called low stress training. It's a plant training method that's been out for years. We just found a way to automate that solution. And most of my background when it comes to cultivation is home grow style, recirculating deep water culture, subsoil. Just this year, actually, just got into outdoors, so I'm more of an indoor girl, and thrilled to be on the panel. Thanks.
Hello everyone, my name is Julian. I am originally from Colombia, and I am the co-founder of Atwood. So Atwood is a software for growers, so you can detect anomalies faster, so you can see and better understand your plants. So I want to talk more about that, and look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, I'm Mark Vlachos. I am a Massachusetts native, born, raised, and educated. Currently the head grower for Holistic Industries. We're in Munson, the retail dispensary in Liberty. Previously I spent almost 5 years with Sierra Naturals, one of the original licensees in Massachusetts. And my work is primarily from a production management as well as facility design, on the facility design end, where I really focus on leveraging agricultural methodologies that are time-tested and proven to bring them into the cannabis space, to really look at profit and results-driven methodologies being implemented overall in the cannabis space.
My name is Maggie Kinsella. I'm the Director of Marketing and Compliance for Coyote Cannabis Corporation. We're moving through our community host process with the City of Uxbridge now. And we'll be doing cultivation and hash rosin. Aside from using cannabis for the past 15 years, I went to the Northeastern Institute of Cannabis in 2014 when it first opened. I worked in the industry starting as a trimmer. I'm a licensed cosmetologist, so trimming just really kind of was a nice switch. And worked my way to harvest supervisor position. So I have not necessarily a green thumb, but when the plants are ready to die, that's when I can take them on, and I know how to make them look pretty, have an eye for detail, and really strive for quality and operational efficiencies and using the least amount of what you need to get the most out of it that you can. So I'll be talking today about efficiencies. I also advise for a company, Orion Partners AI, and it partnered with a sensor company and uses sensor technologies to measure the environment and other variables to optimize your crop.
Let's see. My name is Kyle Bishop. I've been doing this for 20 years. In 2000, Colorado passed 1284, which was the original constitutional defense to medical marijuana. So I got started in 2000. We had caregivers in probably 3 places at a time. We had the plant rule. Went to college, then started doing light deprivation greenhouses under the same model. So then after that, we'll skip ahead to 2010. We had a 140,000 square foot warehouse. And we had our first dispensary in Colorado called Grassroots Health and Wellness, where I was a co-founder there. We got into some political drama with the city and were forced out of that warehouse and went back down to southern Colorado, where we again attacked opening dispensaries and were greenhouse gardening again. After 2010, I became a consultant. I ran a company called Epic Trim and serviced and otherwise consulted for countless operators across the state of Colorado. In 2014, moved to Colorado or to Denver again, and we opened a 200,000 square foot grow. That was called the mothership for a company called Moderator. So my retail manager now here in Colorado or in Massachusetts, the two of us started 22 stores and we did 200,000 square feet, and it was my pleasure to have the opportunity to build, design, operate, and train that facility for some good friends of mine, Josh and Brent Ginsburg, and their investor, Peter. And it was a really awesome time. In 2017, I decided I wanted to go out on my own and own my own place. And so we moved to California, and we consulted across the state. During that time, we were consulting in other states and in Canada. And yeah, so now I'm here in Massachusetts. We have Northeast Alternatives. We're building out another 100,000 square feet right now. We're running mostly vertically integrated. We still purchase a ton of wholesale from Sierra and Holistic and from others that you probably hear in the crowd. So thank you guys for all you do. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So we'll open it up with questions. Okay. All right. So the first question I have is, when you began experimenting with cost reduction strategies, where did you start and why?
So the first time we ever, because my partner and I, we worked for the same company. When I was the harvest supervisor, he was one of the cultivation managers in the flower department. And we had, like most of the larger facilities, had a mold issue. Entire rooms were just going straight to hash, cereal, and ethanol or BHO wash. And my partner had about a decade of experience cultivating the plant, so he was pretty much handed over the reins by the cultivation director and just lowered the nutrients. And we had about a 3-month span where the quality increased, the mold pretty much disappeared, and we were averaging about a 100-gram increase on each tub weight. So we saw how impactful having the right nutrient feed was. So we've taken that knowledge to our own personal grow, and we pretty much dropped out the bottom with all of our variables. And with cannabis, there are a lot of variables, and they all have, if you think of it like a knob, if you turn one knob, you're gonna have to turn all the other knobs in one way or the other. And because there are so many different ways of growing cannabis, and because everybody's doing it so differently, we've really not figured out which knob is which, what is connected to what, and what kind of web we're really looking at. So we took out everything. We dropped our lights down. We went down to 65 watts in our veg. We went down to 400 watts, and we have a cross spectrum of 315 CMH. And for our flower, and we put everything down as low as we could go. We went down to 0, which is your RO water, and we just slowly kind of started to go up. Once we started losing plants and we saw the weight decrease at the end, we're like, all right, we've hit the bottom, we're losing plants, now let's start going up and see where we're really at. And we found, especially through our research, that there's a lot of light being used that's wasteful. Everybody's, for the most part, overlit. And that's some new information that's coming out that people are kind of starting to realize. And you can see it when you look at pictures. If you look down a row, there's like a bleach strip. You know, all your plants are just getting hit a little too hard with light.
What's the par value?
I actually don't have that number off the top of my head, but that is very important. Your par is the heat and intensity, and important to note, with your lighting and not being wasteful with lighting, your height is going to impact what wattage you're going to use, and you can really save a lot of space by lowering your lights and using less wattage instead of putting your lights high up and using a higher wattage. And your par value decreases 50%, I think it is, every foot you're away from your canopy, and then it decreases even further down into your canopy. But back to on topic, we really just kind of reduced everything: our lighting, our watering, our foods, and now we're kind of going back up. So that's one way that you can do it, is to really go over all of your variables and start removing things. And we really found that a tap water level nutrient base seems to be sufficient for our grow. We do cocoa and canna, just A and B, and that's all we're using. We're not using any additives. We're not, we're barely using any pH up or down. We have a neutral pH that doesn't have any nutrients in it. And so you'll just check off those variables as you go and you remove them, and then say, all right, that's not it, that's not it. Because when you're looking at damage signs, like high humidity can be really similar looking to russet mite damage or broad mite damage. And those are two completely different problems that are going to be different to handle when it comes down to it. So to kind of wrap up my answer, mark down all of your variables, see what's going into your plant, and really reduce it and see where you can, where your bottom is, and then start working your way up from there.
From your experience working in a large cultivation facility, what would you say the most common or most easily fixed problem is?
This is a really difficult question, again, because there's just so much information and it's more subjective. I personally found that mold is one of the easier things to fix and is a most common issue that just when I've been conversing with people that they've kind of expressed to me. And that really has to do with your plant health. And a lot of times people look to environmental solutions where it's, oh, the humidity's too high, or you know, it's got to be something with the temperature and humidity. But sometimes it's a nutrient. Sometimes you're too high on your nitrogen, which can be an issue. If you have a botrytis problem, you could be too high on your nitrogen. So it could just be a nutrient issue and not an environmental issue. So I think just plant health as a whole could be an easily fixable problem and solution, instead of going, you know, we've got this weight, you know, we've got to get the weight, and there's this line that's kind of crossed where you're just losing quality, your plant health is suffering, and you're having problems, when you can really bring it back and dial it in and, you know, get better quality and have healthier plants, and in the end, get that weight out of it that you're really looking for.
Mark, you've been cultivating large grows for a long time. As far as changes to grows that you've made in plants, so when you build a big design, it's a big undertaking. Your number one goal is to try to avoid making material changes after the build, because that's going to be your largest cost by a long shot. Is if you do something, have to scrap it, you have downtime, do it again. It happens to most everybody, and you know, I mean, have you ever experienced anything like that? How many changes that were material?
I would say yes. First and foremost, if there's anyone here that's ever considering putting together a cultivation facility, put in floor drains. They're going to be surprised at how many facilities are not, don't think about it when it's time to go and meet with their inspector, or with the sewer department, and and let them know they're going to be putting fertilizer down the drain. It's a scary prospect for a lot of water treatment plants when they first hear that word fertilizer. So it would be that first and foremost. You will have a lot of labor taken up. Things like shop vacuum saucers, right, were fine when it was hanging out in your basement. Not what you should be doing when you're at scale. And it also really, going back to that, it's having floor drains and really building flexibility into your facilities is important. Very often I've gone into facilities where they don't have floor drains. They need to pay for their runoff to be carted away by a waste management company, which inherently requires them to actually tailor their methodology not to what's working best for them in terms of yield or in terms of labor and production, but they actually have to tailor their entire program and cultivation by system and method by the amount of runoff that they can or can't generate. Which that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily miss out on a yield, on hitting their yield targets, but it does mean that there's a lot more thinking goes into that process. Additionally, I'd say the other component is HVAC. Quite a few facilities, particularly in the beginning of Massachusetts licensing medical marijuana cultivation facilities, were utilizing information and best practices from individuals that were, I guess for lack of a better term, they're not from here, right? They're from over there, and over there being California or Colorado or Nevada, somewhere with a high desert, somewhere where you can use a mini split unit, where you can have an outside air intake, and you don't have to worry about being in a high humidity environment. They not really need to worry about a vapor barrier, your dry room, things like that. At the end of the day, here in Massachusetts, this is the Northeast. It'll be when it's 90 degrees, it's 70% humidity. So things work a little differently down to the very building materials you use. You're looking at chilled water systems, not rather than split DX systems. You're looking at a significant amount of dehumidification load, where you're not really able to use as much outside air and ventilation as you want. And this even goes back to now as we come on greenhouse production, really begin to come to the forefront of the industry. You can, I always say, you don't always want to look to Canada for everything. Everyone remembers Beasters, but when you, at the end of the day, when you look at Kincardine, Ontario, Windsor, Ontario, where all the tomato houses are now being bought up by all these giant cannabis firms, You know, all of those greenhouse production spaces are now being looked at and redesigned in a different way. But the climate's actually very similar to here in Massachusetts. But you know, things that they're not using are things like evaporative cooling, you know, ultimately wet walls or fan and pad systems, because again, when it's 90 degrees out, it's 60% humidity, not 16. So it's really important to look at, you know, the full context of any facility and look at your limiting factors, and then within that, you apply technology you see fit. If you have a limiting factor of, you know, available labor, you're going to use, you know, technologies that reduce the amount of labor that you're spending on your canopy management, on your fertility management, et cetera. If your, you know, if your main lacking requirement is electrical power, right, that's where you start looking at LED technologies or less energy intensive means of heating and cooling entirely because that is a big restricting factor. Right, and it all goes back to, you know, the law of minimums, much like our fertilizer is based. It's there's always going to be a limiting factor in any build out and design. It's important for you to identify what that is and really to account for that in your build, and then also build in flexibility so that when inevitably, you know, you'll figure out a better way to build a mousetrap, build it in a way so that when you have to go and you know, perform a lot of these retrofits, as Kyle mentioned, that you know, always occur. You're actually able to do that retrofit without suddenly, you know, needing to shut down your entire facility all at once because your, you know, your wiring wasn't done properly, or it all goes back to one switch gear you now need to tap into.
Absolutely. Be sure to make a big enough trim room and enough bench space. Those are the two most common things that I've seen in the past is for redos. Okay, where are we going to make some more space for storage? Where are we going to find some more space for all the little things that, you know, it's not all just a flower. You know, so floor drains, great. So as far as efficiencies go, obviously salaries are a major part. When you're talking about scalability, you're talking about, you know, sucking the water out of one of the saucers. You know, how do you avoid, you know, sucking the water out of the saucers? Like, what's kind of the ethos, or like, you know, what is your mantra, I guess? And how would you describe, you know, the effective automation on salaries?
Sorry, you mean effective automation in terms of the amount of money devoted to labor?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the end of the day, you know, two things cost money to steal from Carl Hammer, Vermont Compost Company. Two things cost money in any agricultural operation, and it's the heat and yaw, which is yaw being your labor. So in indoor production, your heat is really your cooling and your lighting, and those can be reduced in, you know, a litany of ways. You can find energy consultants to assist with that. But from a labor perspective, your number one component really is going to be your canopy management, simple things like your canopy management, the automation of your container filling, and how you do substrate management. There's also going to be things like going to fertilizer mixing and what your fertilizer mixing program and fertigation system look like. Do you have a centralized system, or is it a diffuse approach? You know, is it one person dumping 2 50-pound bags into a stock tank, or is it someone who's, you know, measuring out, you know, this many milliliters of 15 different components, mixing them up in one reservoir, having to pH it and EC it, and you know, perform all these different duties. In terms of the automation that you can really employ, there's quite a bit that we can be taking, you know, just, and I encourage anyone to just take it as quickly as you can from the agricultural industry. You know, this goes back to the fertilizers that they use are no different from the fertilizers that we use, except ours have shiny, fancy labels, and you know, claim that many now say that they are for cannabis, but it's all the same salts that go in them. For you know, benching management, you've got Dutch pallet systems are something that I have always been a big proponent of. It enables you to, you know, literally build your harvest room large enough that you're moving your benching just entirely down basically an automated or an automated or mechanized line, bringing it right into your harvest place. You don't want people going back and forth with a million carts to harvest 1,000 plants. You want to wheel them all in all at once, have your harvest team pick it all down, and you know, then just move it down the next step. Again, going back to automation, irrigation. Even if you don't have floor drains, you should be automating your irrigation. You should be using whether it's a drip system or an flood system. That really goes towards, you know, your particular growing method. But at the end of the day, you need to have automated watering. Hand watering is, you know, probably the number one largest labor suck that I've found in most facilities that I go into. And then really the next one that's followed up would be the time to prune. So when you're pruning in flower, you've got to think of, every day the plant is increasing the amount of biomass that's on it. While it's increasing that biomass, which is at the expense, which is at your expense because you're providing the light, you're providing the water, the nutrition, and carbon dioxide for this plant to form up. When you go and you prune out all those lowers or you prune out all these components of the canopy, you're basically throwing away money that you spent for that plant to develop and grow those very branches and leaves that you're now taking on. While obviously, I'm not saying don't ever prune and it's not necessary, but what I am saying is if you go through and you're doing, have a methodology by which you're topping, skirting high and veg, which you see, Jungle Boys made it infamous with their one movie flip, that they stole off a THC farmer in 2009. It all goes back to when you're touching the plant, from a lean management and manufacturing perspective, when you're touching that plant, you want to perform as many actions on that plant as you can before you send it back down the line. So if you're picking it up, your topping methodology requires 2, 3, 4, 5 topping, depending on the veg cycle. Every time you're topping, you should also be removing your fans. You should be removing your lows. You should be putting on any biological control agent sachets that you're using. That should also, you should perform that around your transplant if you're able to, depending on how the varietals respond to that transplant stress. It's really, really important that you need, and it really requires an audit where you sit down, you map out your process flow, and you draw on a diagram. It's going to look like a big bowl of spaghetti, but as you draw that out on a diagram, as how that process moves throughout your facility, you'll very quickly find that there are a lot of inefficiencies in how product and people flow through it.
Are there specific machines that you suggest for automation processes?
Nobody's paying me to plug in these machines, or these automation components. But what I would say is, I've always been a big fan of dosatron. I think those, everybody's using dosatrons now. 5 years ago they were a rarity. Those really help with folks whether you're mixing you're still using a liquid, what I call a legacy program, or you're using a standard agricultural grade fertilizer. Things like dosatrons, Argus makes it very fancy, pretty good as well with all the bells and whistles. There's also, Logix, BV, Logiqs. They're out of the Netherlands. They actually make shuttle systems where you have a person stand in one place, and there's an automated shuttle that will move throughout your facility, actually moving all these plants on all these benches to that person. You're not paying a person to move anywhere. There's just hopefully it doesn't turn into an I Love Lucy sketch, but you have a tray literally brought to you where they're pruning and acting on that plant. They never even enter a room, they never are stepping around, etc. There's also trimming automation technologies, which I would definitely recommend you do due diligence on. There are a lot of them that are basically, it looks like a glorified barrel washer and it's tumbling like your dryer. You may want to be careful and take a look at your before and after. Do you have trichome heads being knocked off? Wet trimmers, I think that would be something. Don't look to Canada there. They use a lot of wet trimmers up there. Wet trimmers are used quite a bit outdoor in California work, but I've found that dry trimmers are really, if you're going to look towards that automation, you go with that. And at the end of the day, it's depending on the level of automation, what your end goal is with your product. If you think that you can command a higher price point for your product, because of the care with which you handle it, it's worth the extra labor expenditure if you're going to command that price. It's like right now, if you go to the store and you buy cherry tomatoes, or you buy giant nice bush tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes cost more per pound because it costs more for the harvesting labor. And that's where going back, trimming machines are very attractive to a lot of people, where you don't have to have a crew of 50 people. Now you have a crew of 5 or 10. I would just say that when you do perform that level, when you implement that level of automation, also understand that you really want a lot of skilled individuals that are working with your machinery.
So you think that the salary goes up a little bit because you have quality control?
I would say it ought to. If you have one person that's performing the work of 4 people, the dollar, you're still, if you're saving 3 salaries, you could pay one individual twice as much and still save 2 salaries, and now you have an individual that you're really investing in that resource. And with automation comes a significant level of complexity. With that, if you go to a Dutch tomato house, it used to be there'd be 10 growers and 2 folks doing repairs and maintenance on the systems. Now there's 2 growers, but there's 10 guys doing repairs and maintenance on the system. So you want to make sure that your staff need to be paid enough for what they're teaching, for the technical levels and skill that you're expecting them.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to head down one more. Please go back. Yeah, right. I got your questions. From your research, what is the biggest loss factor for both of us?
So what we see is lack of visibility, like lack of knowing how every plant is feeling. Like today, growers have information about the environmentals of the room, or how your scouting team is showing to you, like, hey, this is what we see where the plants are performing bad. So because of that, like you see a lot of like variability in yield cycle to cycle, and you see that the growers, in fact, cannot excel their craft growing skills at home at large scale. That you have to take care now not only of 12 plants that you have to take maybe at your home, it's hundreds or thousands of plants in those facilities. And not knowing where to go is an issue, because growers today face an optimization challenge of their time. How to allocate my time more efficient, how to allocate my tasks more efficient, where to put like my labor, where to focus my efforts, and that because of that you're having high variability in yields, you're having a lot of high cost inputs like energy or nutrients and so on, but also you're still facing problems of pest and diseases. Like not only in Massachusetts, but in the whole country, you have like 10% of average yield losses because of this. So that's what we see, lack of visibility, I would say.
How would you say your software fixes these solutions or problems?
So I would say machine vision solutions are trying to get this plant level data. So what we are doing, for example, in Arabic, we have a set of cameras that is scanning every one of your plants every day. And then we're comparing that information with our data set. And we're giving an answer about if this plant healthy, if this plant unhealthy. What is the problem with this plant? This plant has any potential early signs of a pest or disease or not? And then we're translating this information with our software. So the grower at the end, what it's seeing is like in an iPad, in your phone, in a tablet, in a computer, how is your facility? Where are the hotspots? Where should I target first? If I'm going to send my IPM team to the flowering room, I want them to go to the bench number 3, to the pot number 2, and check at that plant, because that's the plant that has early signs of powdery mildew. So that's what we're trying to aim, trying to close the loop with plant level information, and at the end, we are targeting to increase yields by 5 to 20%, and try to decrease the cost of gram by 10%. If you are able to close the loop of having nowhere where to go with your team, you can definitely do a lean optimization in every plant, and that's what we're aiming.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, another question about the changing cultivation landscape and what kind of technology changes do you think we're going to be seeing here in the future?
Well, I think the cannabis industry is kind of the catalyst for a lot of the ag tech that we're seeing that can be used for not just cannabis, but agriculture altogether. I really don't think the LEDs technology that we've seen is really due to tomatoes. It's due to cannabis, as much as people may not want to actually market it that way. But going back to, I think it was a comment that you made about efficiencies and energy and people. What was it? Heat and yaw is what you said. I think there's a lot that can be done in regards to reducing heat. I know in our lab we use LED lights, but we can also keep them very close to the plants and turn that dimmer down. So we're running at about 60% capacity with about maybe like less than 500 PAR in flower. And with that, what we're doing is we're eliminating how much water uptake the plants are pulling out, and then also releasing that humidity into the air. So heat really drives everything. It's driving my nutrient uptakes, it's driving how much water is circulating through the system, and now it's driving how my HVAC system is working. So I think really the heat factor is where we could use a lot more help when it comes to innovation. And then you also talked about the part about y'all and automation. And it's not that you want to reduce things down to the point where you're not hiring people. It's really about trying to find the balance between efficiency and quality, so that you can hire the right type of people to take care of what you've really got, and that as an operator you can scale and really control your costs. So to me, I think you mentioned a little bit about the processes of how many plants you may have in your facility, and the need to move those plants through your process. So for example, there's a method that's called Sea of Green that's very popular with a lot of people. So Sea of Green, I don't know if, can you raise your hands, everyone familiar with that term, Sea of Green, shake your heads or something, cool, thanks. So in that process, you're doing a lot of small plants and you're moving them through the system, which is fast, so it feels efficient, but there's all these other things that are tied to that, such as the people that have to move those plants from one room to the next, your mother plants that have to feed that room, because the more smaller plants you're growing, the more mother plants you need, and you also have to maintain and take care of those mother plants as well. So to me, there's a balance between how many plants we're actually using in your floor plan. It's not to say that you only need one plant can replace 32, but there's some balance there in plant count. So from a residential perspective, you got to worry about plant count, but I think even from a commercial scale, there should be some considerations there as well. The more plants that you have, the more you have to maintain them and train them. So our system, Trello Technologies, Trello Grow LST, is an automated plant training solution. It uses low stress training. So low stress means that you're not doing excessive cutting, topping, super cropping. You're just simply taking the top of the plant and bending that plant sideways. And when you bend that plant sideways, instead of having to cut off all of those bottom branches that never got enough light penetration, when you turn it sideways, all those branches now have access to the light, so they stay on your plant. So kind of going back to the point that someone made earlier, when you're cutting off every branch you cut off is a top. I'll see sometimes on Instagram and pictures on social media of these plants that are just like sticks with flowers. I think you eventually get to that point, but people are maybe doing that too soon in the process, and maybe to an extent that might be detrimental to the efficiency. So that's my answer.
So here in Massachusetts, in case you guys don't know, we have a lot of restrictions on our carbon footprint, on our use of wattage. We have a 36 watt rule, which is very unique to the cannabis industry. It doesn't exist a lot of places. So there's a lot of pressure for us, and it's a good thing, to find efficiencies and to find ways to make it so that we're not the eco-terrorists that indoor growers truly can be. And so, in your experience, what would you say is some of the most influential or most effective ways of navigating this political and otherwise efficiency?
I think going back to what I mentioned with LED lights, using that technology, and then being able to get the lights as close as possible to your plants, and then dimming that switch. We're able to start at 31 watts per square foot in our lab. We're using ProGrowTech EV360s. I don't get any kickback for throwing their name out there. I'm just sharing with you the manufacturer that we use, that we seem to have some success with. With their system, we don't have to use that full, I guess, intensity. We're really able to get it down, and we keep the light maybe about 6 inches away from the plant. So that really helps as well. We're not getting that kind of, I guess, bleaching that you see from overheating the plants, and the leaves start to turn brown way too soon. That's too much heat on your plants. I also think that a lot of people, not a lot, I'll take that back because I haven't spoken to everybody in the world, but there are some people that are hesitant to, I think, embrace in the cannabis industry, embrace this energy efficiency because they're concerned about quality. But I think it's really imperative that we understand that the cannabis plant came from the earth, and that we should do everything that we can to protect the source of this plant. And if that means being smarter and having to do a little bit more thinking and being a little bit more proactive about how we grow, then so be it. Because we want to make sure that not only that we have indoor growing, we still want to make sure that there's an option for outdoor in the way that our climate is acting right now that's being threatened.
Awesome. I'm gonna make one comment about that as well. We actually have found different ways to find some pretty intense efficiencies. Thinking outside the box and being creative, and using and just kind of trying to find different ways to do things that have been done before. We're currently borrowing freeze lines off the freezer, 100 million square foot freezer. We're able to actually use those lines to cool our coils, which then allows us to warm their returns, right? So they're selling us their used power. So things like that, you can suddenly find efficiencies that you didn't think existed. So really looked at other industries, looked at cogen, natural gas. You can actually make your own power, use the heat from the generators to warm your dehumidifying coils, and then use all the energy that it makes to cool. And you know what I mean? So, and then you actually can capture the gas and then scrub it and feed it back to the plants. So that's kind of one of the things that we're doing at Northeast Alternatives to kind of really think outside the box, to create efficiencies that are new and hopefully replicable. So anyway, we've got 20 more minutes. I want to make sure, is there questions? Is there anything people want to talk about while you've got us up here? Nothing? If you guys think of anything or if there's something that comes up, just raise your hand. I'll call out on you. But I want to have a little bit of fun with this, so I guess I'll just go down the line. What's the biggest mistake you've made?
So we were growing with soil, and we were reusing our soil, and I like to do creative stuff, so I was saving the roots for art projects, and you can do other things with the roots, but when you reuse your soil, you want to keep the roots in the soil because that's where your nutrients are going to be. If you keep taking the roots out, you're literally taking out things that it needs, and we were wondering why a couple of our plants were just like dying, and I was like, I take the roots out. My partner was like, no. And I had been confused by a previous conversation because I thought that there needed to be worms and other stuff breaking down the roots, and that was not the case. So I learned a big lesson on that one.
Pass it on down.
I would put it at one of two. I don't know how to weigh them against each other. One would be on a facility design. We were told time is of the essence. We can't do, we cannot do anything to, even a week of time is, money lost. We've got to get the cultivation facility going, and plants on the ground. That sense of urgency is always there on just about every growing project. And it was actually why I say floor drains. There was a project where you did not put in floor drains, and there didn't put in. Then when you have a cultivation facility in operation, you can't exactly go cutting up concrete. So that suddenly we're looking at very creative trough systems and sump pumps, having to change our bench heights to account for basically how we're going to get our wastewater out of our room. That would be one or two. And the other would be performing a trial on organic cultivation methodologies. Something in Massachusetts that I would encourage anyone and everyone thinking about being the next organic producer or providing some kind of organic product. You will run afoul of Massachusetts metals testing. Even just your inputs alone, are what will betray you. And part of that is, organic production methodologies are based around reuse of former waste products or really a closed loop system. And what you can fall victim to there is, if you're getting broiler litter fertilizer, for example, that there's significant amounts of various metals in there. And if God help you, you might pass the first time if you're reusing your soil. Cannabis is a hyperaccumulator. Once you start reamending with a lot of these substances, there's such batch-to-batch variation in organic fertilizer because of it's just the nature of the beast. These inputs, you will find very quickly that if your whole plan is only based around growing organically, get metals testing done on the method that you're running now before you decide to implement that on a sort of large scale.
For us, it was a lesson of focus. So So when we were starting this company, as my friend was saying, this is not only something that we can apply, early anomaly detection system for cannabis, but for other crops. So we got approached for a big Chinese corporation, and they were growing tomatoes to grow organic tomatoes in China. So they were excited because if you're growing organically, you need to detect anomalies earlier so you can, at the end, do not use pesticides. It was a really good opportunity. We got funding for that, but it delayed us and it took us away the focus of this industry. So we have to make a choice between both industries to deliver a good product at first, and we ended up choosing cannabis. So it's our focus right now, and I guess as an insight, I guess for everyone in any industry is when, especially in Massachusetts, for example, right now there are like 30 final licenses, 30 provisional licenses, 100 other licenses in the pipeline. So competition is going to be more and more. So try to focus and choose how do you want to differentiate in the market. Is it going to be quality product? Is it going to be price? Is it going to be, so for us it was focus.
That's great.
I think for us it would be, we neglected the root zone in our test lab. We are trying to figure out a way to reduce the overall height from the base of the plant all the way to the top of your lights. So in one of our grow trials, we tried to utilize a very shallow hydroponic tray for a recirculating deep water culture system, and it just severely restricted how big the root system could get. And looking back on it, it was kind of like, duh. I mean, if we're trying to make the most out of one plant, and you want as many branches and as many tops as possible, you're going to have a lot of roots to help utilize, pull all that nutrients up so that the plant can actually deliver what it needs to deliver to the right place. So the bigger the plant, the bigger your stems, the bigger your root system is going to be. So for us, it was kind of like, darn, like once you started, it's kind of difficult to stop at that stage once you figure it out. So it was a learning lesson for us. But what it made us do is kind of look at our design and to take a step back and to modify it so that we could utilize bigger media containers, bigger grow containers. So we're no longer restricting that root zone. That was on this.
A mistake that I've made in the past was not focusing enough attention to post-harvest management. You can grow the greenest flowers on earth, but if it's not being managed after you take it down, it all turns to hay. So you guys are opening up operations. Don't forget about your people in post-harvest. They are the soldiers. They work so hard, and so does everybody in the trim room. So make sure that you pay attention to your post-harvest and that you don't forget how much room and how much time and how much energy it takes to keep your wheat, as good as you want it to be.
Actually, just to chime in on that, so having been to several different worked at several facilities in Massachusetts, and I think the overall project total in the Northeast of about 12 different grow facilities. I will say that while once a facility is dialed in, the plants always seem to look the same. The dry cure rooms are very, if you ask 10 growers, you get 11 opinions, but their methodologies there are varied. It's the dry cure rooms are what make or break a production system. If your folks are spending tens of millions of dollars on these cultivation facilities and all this HVAC and all these grow rooms and all these lights and automated systems, and then they go and if you're drying it at 80 degrees and 45% humidity, you basically just spent 24, 48 hours cooking something sous vide and then tossed it in a microwave. It's what, and sadly, that's what it really does make or break their quality. Where it's, that really ends up as your ceiling. And I think a lot of growers really neglect that, or they just they don't realize that arguably somebody who's sitting there and holds your flower, untrimmed in their hands is going to make or break what that looks like before it goes into a jar. Is that really the person that you want to treat as an expendable entry-level individual, or do you recognize the value in that if you have a person who is happy and wants to really put the care, put their heart into the care of your product, that's what's going to show on the end. So that when people are going and taking pictures of your product on Instagram, if there's a bunch of hearts or flame emojis next to it, and not.
think that's a great answer. So we talked a little bit earlier about post-harvest operations, and we talked about machines, specifically wet trimming, dry trimming, all that kind of stuff. All the machines have a purpose and place. Depends on what your strategy is. If you have an outdoor crop and you're trying to bring it down quick, a wet tumbling machine is going to be your best friend. You're going to save your crop. It's going to be great. If you're doing dry trim, and you're in a production facility, dry trimming is definitely the way to go. We recommend 70% dry trim machines and then do the last 36% by hand. If you're somebody that's really focused on the world's greatest steak and that's all that you want to do, then you're going to be hand trimming everything. So in cannabis, as a consultant for over 10 years, I think you're going to hear from all of us, it's the same thing. It depends. There's never an answer for anything that you're doing for everybody. Everything is contingent to situation. What's your humidity, as you mentioned? What's your temperature outside? What's this? What's that? From the products you use, from everything that you do. So be sure to do your diligence. Never trust anybody's advice. Combinations of two right things are wrong very often. So make sure you double check everything that everybody tells you, even me. Is there any other questions out there right now?
I'd like to know what each of your strategies and best question or tactic in the interview process, because influencers are so important, and it's not necessarily their fault all the time, but they may not be as self-aware as well as me about what their actual strengths and weaknesses are. So what's your strategy in being able to pick that out in an interview process?
I love that question. Who's going to go first? I ask people at the end of the interview, in the next 3 seconds, describe yourself using 3 adjectives. As a motor vehicle driver, go. And usually people will tell you more about themselves with that question than they will ever tell themselves in their interview. Catch them off guard, ask them how they are as a driver, and suddenly you will know more about this person. If they say fast or slow, I mean, you can figure it.
It's tough too because the interview is your first impression, and there are often times where people give a much better first impression than they reflect in their work environment, which is why that 90-day window is so important, because right around that 90 days, they'll start to slip into their habits. They'll start to, so I think that's a really good interview question. Mostly noticing the way their body responds. Do they get agitated if they're asked a confrontational question like, did you ever get into an argument with your manager, and were you right or wrong, and how did you handle it? I personally want someone who is going to even question me if I was their manager, but you don't want someone who's going to just flat out argue with you about everything. So there's definitely a balance there. And for me, it's tough for me to pick that up because I'm like, everybody's wonderful, like they're gonna be so great, we're gonna have so much fun, and then, they're not always great, and I'm not necessarily easy to work with either. I personally have really high standards. I have high expectations for work quality and things getting done in a timely fashion, and, if you can't get it done, say something and pass the buck and so on, but yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm curious to hear everybody else's strategies on it, but that's what I would. So my approach, or I guess what I call my interview methodology would be, for the first interview, if it's an internal candidate, always, and then actually very often I'll do this with outside hires. There's a book by an author named Michelle Edwards called Chicken Man, and I actually have the interviewee, it's a children's book, it's maybe like, it's 2 sentences a page across 15 pages. It takes them, 5 minutes, maybe 8 minutes to read. And I actually have them read that book. One is it's just immediately kind of changes the tempo of the interview, where if they came in and they were, had all their, performer set of answers, I'm able to get something that's a bit more like rather than a professional headshot, right? I'm getting kind of a candid photo. The other component is when they're done with that book, the most important question that I ask in that interview for me is what's the moral of the story here? And I will say that I always get a different answer, but from that response, you can really tell what that person
is expecting. The book itself is about, it's not the job, it's the person doing it. And as you, it really, well, I've gotten, I've had maybe one or two people give that actual answer. For me, it's when someone immediately goes to, oh, well, it's a job, it's about how, if somebody's a rock star at a job, they deserve that position, regardless of, any other circumstances. I'm summarizing, but, when I hear an answer like that, or it boils down to that, that tells me that I'm interviewing someone who, if they think that they're the best at something, but they might not be willing to work with a team and share responsibilities on that. Additionally, I've had people who say, oh, it's about not complaining, and while people seem to think that I want to, that's what, as an interviewer or as a potential boss or a manager, that's what you want to hear. But at the end of the day, that's not it. It's not that we just want a quiet workplace with no complaints. It's actually we want people to understand, again, what the nature of the work is, and be prepared for that. So I would say that's, my biggest internet strategy.
What was the name of your
strategy? Chicken Man by Michelle Atwood. It's every facility I've ever done hiring for, I have a copy of that book on my desk.
I guess maybe you have heard this, but every people said try to do open questions, try to not lead the conversation. I have two questions that I usually ask. One is, what is the work environment that you perform the best? Try to understand how does he likes to work, because I think people could be really rock stars, but maybe superstars, but maybe they perform in a different work environment than yours. So try to understand that. And the second question, which maybe it's more challenging, but it gives you a lot about the person itself, is why I should not hire you right now. And it gives you a sense of people to reflect of if there's a fit in the organization and themselves.
I can't say that I have a particular question for an interview process. Usually it's more the body language reading and the emotional intelligence type of thing. So I'll ask some open-ended questions and allow them to answer, and then I'll usually ask a question off of that so that it's more conversational. And then if it's conversational enough to where they're in their comfort zone, they tend to kind of relax, and then I can get more reads. For example, at the end of an interview with one young gentleman, there were two people being interviewed side by side, and as they left the room, the gentleman just kind of stood there, and the young lady opened the door and walked through, which is, I'm not fine with that, I don't care who opens the door, but the young man didn't turn around and say thank you to her, and that's when I was like, nah, you're good. So, because to me it's very important that there's, teamwork, and that you understand that it's not just you in the room, that there are other people around you. Self-awareness is very key. I believe if people have the ability to work together, regardless of their background or their experience or how expert they are, you can usually get really good things out of them. So that's how I do it.
I love that answer, that question. Why shouldn't I hire you? I asked that one as well. My favorite answer is because I'm here for your job. That's awesome. In our companies and in this industry, everybody's moving so fast, and there's always a lot of growth if you're successful. You always want to be hiring yourself out of a job. Awesome. Is there any other questions? We got 4 more minutes.
Yeah, I'm very curious to know how your automated system works to orient the plants horizontally. How does it operate?
Yeah, so I'll describe it, but if you want to see it working in action, you can go to Trella, TRELLA.io. There's an animation video, and there's also some videos of it actually working with a real actual plant. So if you go to our homepage, you'll see it, and then if you click Explore on our tab, you'll see a lot more videos that have a lot more of that real video action going on. But low stress training means no trimming, no pruning, no super cropping. So basically what we're doing is, if I can get that stand real quick. Trella, TRELLA.io. So if we imagine that this is a 12-inch seedling, this plant, this mic right here, basically what we're doing is we're holding it at the main stem, and this is the top of the plant. So the top of the plant goes through a ring about that big, and so we maintain that as the top. We don't cut it, we don't trim it, and as it wants to grow further up, We sense that with sensors inside, and we move it slowly down a pathway. So basically, instead of the top being allowed to keep going up, it's just kind of being bent slightly to go down a pathway. Eventually, it gets to the end, and what it looks like is you've got a main stem that's coming out of your grow media container, turning, and then the top of it opening up, do that ring again. Once it gets to the end, we take that top, there's a top mesh panel that just kind of holds it in. It lets light through, lets air through. We also have ventilation fans underneath that canopy to make sure that we don't have any stagnant air, which can lead to mold and bacteria and pests. And so once we get to the end, we take the top mesh panel off, and then all those branches that remained intact that we never cut off are all now potential tops. They all have access to the light. So you allow it to stretch for your 2 to 3 week stretch period. And then we have a series of trellis grids netting similar to what you're probably using in your grow now. And you allow those to kind of, fit into the grid. So it's not 100% hands-off. There's some training that happens between the process between vegetation and flower. And on this particular grow that we're doing, we actually are doing some excessive trimming after flower just to see what happens. So yeah, it's there's still some hands-on work that happens, but it usually only requires about 15 minutes every 2 weeks.
You got schwazen?
I'm not familiar.
Schwazen's when you pull off all the families on grade 21.
Oh, I call it just defoliating. I'm not cool enough. but yeah, so we do pull off some of the families, but when we're doing our grow trials, I'm trying to do worst case scenarios. I'm trying to figure out how hands-off can we really be before we encounter a problem. So we don't do, in our grow trials, we don't do a lot of defoliating because I want to test that ventilation to make sure that if somebody can't get to their plant in time, will there be an issue? Will our ventilation that we're adding to it be sufficient?
So a lot of focus on microphone.
Yes. Yeah, that's key. We learned that the hard way. I could have had that as my other, mistake that we made. We got too confined and had too much congestion, and we had to open it up and make it bigger. Yes.
Cool. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, I'm Kyle Bishop. I'm the COO and co-owner at Northeast Alternatives. Say who they are as we check out.
Maggie Kinsella, the Director of Marketing and Compliance for Coyote Cannabis Corporation.
Mark Vlachos, I'm the head grower at Holistic Industries.
Julian Ortiz, I am the COO and co-founder of Atwood.
Atwood, CEO of Trella Technologies.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.